The joke always was that the guy reads dirty magazines. A college guy would say, hey, he reads dirty magazines. And the image always was of uneducated people, men who were frustrated and whatnot, and you'd be wearing the long dirty raincoat with a hat, over his head, tucked down, and he'd go down to 199th Street and, in the corner and go in the dirty bookstore, because that's the only place you'd ever see something like that. And so that was the image of the guy who looked at naked pictures of naked ladies. Who else does that, We said little girls put away their paper dolls at age 10, and they're now supposed to grow up and not play with paper dolls anymore. So college guys wouldn't see themselves as lusting after paper dolls. They were way too educated for that sort of thing. Our World War II generation had completely broken from that kind of salacious conduct. I want to say everybody, but the generation as a generation had broken from that. They were focused on building a life for themselves and rebuilding their lives. One of the things people forget, who are not my age and older, is how traumatized the nation was post-World War II.
A date which will live in infamy.
That war exhausted and traumatized this country. This became a planting ground for a lot of what followed. 1948, Kinsey hits with his tome, his Sexual Revolution tome. The guys are barely coming home in 1946. They're staggering home from World War II. They're just starting to breathe when we get hit with that sexual revolutionary book by Kinsey. They called it the K-bomb, Kinsey's book, which revolutionizes Hefner. A revolution is what took place. A real revolution.
I was 24 years old when I went into the porn industry. I had been in the sex industry 6 years, from age 18 to 24. Every single day was traumatic. Girls were getting hurt around me. I'd seen lots of girls been hurt or killed. There's so much trauma. So someone came up to me and says, "Why don't you try porn?" I went, "Porn?" They're like, "It's legal." I go, "Legal?" That was my most attractive quality about doing porn, was that it was legal. And I went, "Really?" And the second most attractive quality was, she said, "You can make like $2,500 a movie?" And I went, "What?" Back then you could actually make more than you do now. Well, that was probably just the first gig though. Like, they lure you in just like the pimps did. So I went, "Well, how hard can that be? I'm having sex, only it's on camera. What's the diff?"
Well, in the U.S., on a daily basis, we got anywhere from 40 million adults looking at pornography on a daily basis, so it's hard to get those numbers exact. Most of the images they see, almost all of it shows no physical or emotional consequences. I remember the first issue that I actually remembering is Madonna. The Material Girl was on the cover. It was a big deal to possess that Playboy. It was probably comparable to like the Marilyn Monroe being on the cover. And that was the beginning.
In my own clinical work, some days I feel like I'm an Army medic on a battlefield. I'm an Army medic on a battlefield, and I'm picking up wounded bodies. I'm picking up teenagers, children, marriages, all these profoundly wounded people. And I finished my training in psychiatry in 1976. I didn't get it. I didn't understand fully what was happening. I just saw this carnage all around me. All these kids devastated by divorce, all these young people not knowing how to relate, all these young women being used as sexual objects, being very depressed, not trusting men, getting into substance abuse. And I know that so much of that woundedness is because of the sexual utilitarian philosophy. It's because people are using people as sexual objects, and nobody's talking about it.
Kinsey was officially at Indiana University a zoologist, and his specialty was this little teeny-weeny gall wasp. And what he does is he goes out with his young boys, young men, who are studying under him, and they go into the forest, and they have little nets, and they capture all these wee little tiny, tiny gall wasps, and they bring them back to the laboratory, and they label each one very meticulously, and its wingspan and so forth. Now this becomes rather important because later, when Kinsey's talking about how you measure human sexuality, he said it shouldn't be any different than measuring gall wasps. You know, the measurement of the wingspan, and it's this long and this wide, and I should be an expert in dealing with human sexuality as I am in dealing with gall wasps.
I grew up the first 8 years of my life in Temple City, California. It was a pretty average life. Like I said, I went to Sunday school, and I used to think that I was invincible because I got away with murder. And my dad, like I said, he was busy working, and my mom was really innocent. So she just was very innocent and didn't know what to do with this rebellious little wop, they called me.
Well, I'm from Lower Bucks County in Pennsylvania. Grew up in a small town, 400 acres of corn around my house. One of 4 kids, youngest of 4. I was really into sports as a young guy. Played all sports, but football became my passion in life, and pursued professional sports post-college. Growing up with 2 older brothers and an older sister, you know, I was kind of like the little saint and prince in the family. I don't know if I was spoiled. We didn't have a lot.
And then my parents moved, and my dad started a business. So of course, building a business is a lot of work. And my parents joined together while he started this business. We stopped going to church, and I was left to myself to be an FBI agent, which I was. All I did was get into trouble. I played ditch. I did things like lay on the sidewalk and put ketchup all over me with my glasses going, oh. You know, I was just bored as a kid. I was full of life, and I had nothing to do. So as a child, I was desperate for attention. I would have burned the house down if I thought it had gotten me attention, which was just a prerequisite for the sex industry.
Father passed away when I was 11, and he was buried on my 12th birthday. I was a late bloomer socially, so after my dad's death, I didn't fall into any vices. Well, I did. I mean, we'll get into that, but at the time, I didn't see them as vices. So I always wanted the opinion of others to be very good.
I was very confused growing up because my mother was cold and distant, although not a bad person, just very religious. And then my father was distant. He was a workaholic. I'm not mad at my parents or anything, but you know, obviously they made mistakes as young parents, and one of them was ignorance. They ignored me, and they were ignorant about the world getting into me. There's 2 people who compete for your child, and that's you as a parent or the world. And basically my parents didn't compete, they didn't fight for me, so the world won me.
So anyway, Kinsey begins attacking this issue, and he interviews women and men on campus. He takes them in privately and asks them private questions. Nobody knows what he asks. There was never a record that we were allowed to see. Nobody has any proof as to what their answers were. There was never any record, okay? But as a scientist, suddenly this kind of invalid collection of data, it's not even data, takes on the resilience of hard experimental science. Well, you can't do that. You can't secretly go off and ask people questions. You never tell them what your questions are, and you have no proof that the answers they gave you are the answers that you've written down, much less if you could figure it out. Yet this becomes the Bible of the field of human sexuality education and human sexuality and changing our laws. This is bizarre.
The very nature of the human person is so much shriveled. Because human persons today, unfortunately, are viewed as objects. This occurs not just in marriages, this is occurring, unfortunately, across the whole culture. The whole culture just turns you in, makes you think, me, 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 me. What's everybody doing for me? I mean, Robbie George at Princeton is talking about it, you know? People at Princeton are looking at it, having conferences on it, but in almost no universities is there any warning about what the sexual utilitarian philosophy can do to college students. And we know what it can devastate them. So many college students who are they're into sexual hooking up, they're profoundly depressed, they don't know how to have friendships. The guys in particular, they've been into pornography since they were 13. Videos, nonsense, you know, filming, trying to film women, get naked pictures of them, put it up with their friends in their high school years. They're in college, and they're severely depressed, their concentration goes, their memory goes, and they think, what's going on here? What's happening to me? But they don't get it, that they're lonely. They don't know how to have friendships.
Pornography has been around for a very long time, but with the internet and the technology, there's a whole new way of spreading this stuff around, and it's coming into our homes on a daily basis. So we have a $97 billion global revenue for pornography in 2006. That was practically double from 2005, which was $57 billion. So the U.S. is responsible for 89% of all the pornographic web pages that are out there today.
My nephew started at college recently. I asked him, well, Nick, when they, with your orientation, so they warned about the danger of substance abuse, they warned about the dangers of this, they warned about the dangers of that. Nick, did they warn about the dangers of hooking up? They warned about the dangers of the sexual utilitarian philosophy and what that does. You know, we know from the books Unprotected, or the studies now of young college co-eds, how it's devastating them. Not a single word. Not a word.
Kids are going to get 15,000 sexual images this year on television, and they think it's no big deal. And pornography is no big deal because it's just one other manifestation of it. But it is a big deal, and lives are being ruined and destroyed as a result of it. And until people start waking up, it's just going to get worse. The perversion is just going to get worse and worse.
This is what's really creating enormous pathology in young people today. They don't know how to have healthy friendships, and they don't realize the importance of friendships. They don't have deep relationships in which they really respect others and they see the goodness and the beauty in others. And one of the reasons is they don't see it in themselves.
Well, one of the first, the most shocking things is you look through his data and you're trying to see, and people criticized his data, and they did say that it, a lot of it wouldn't be accurate. They didn't criticize it properly, as thoroughly, of course, as they should have. But people in those years didn't think of scientists as deviants. They just didn't. And so they didn't ever question him as a man. They believed the propaganda that they had been given. Now, pages 160 and 161, in which he describes the so-called orgasms that these tortured children are having, tell us we've got a problem here. Then when we move to take a look at the data that he was providing, the tables, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, in which children are being sexually molested around the clock, 24 hours at a time. You have a little boy who's 4 years old who has 26 orgasms in 24 hours. That is an around-the-clock experiment, a guinea pig experiment on some 4-year-old boy. Who's doing that? And who calls that science? That's the science that changed our society and that really has revolutionized the West in general.
At age 9, I had a pretty terrible thing happen. Again, I was left to myself. So I went, I could spend the night at whose ever house that I wanted to. So I spent the night at a classmate's house. Her and her brother were pretty popular, and he was older. And I remember when she invited me over, I thought that was so cool. And she and her brother started molesting me in the pool. And I was in shock. And then they took my clothes off, and they were all naked. And I remember going, ah! I mean, oh my gosh. That's probably the most shocking moment of my whole life. And I didn't want to look stupid. I kept thinking, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to lose our friendship. I don't want them to not like me. I don't want, and they'll tell the whole school. And I had all these emotions going on. And so I just remember trying to swim to the side of the pool like, la, 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 let's just forget this ever happened. Oh my gosh. All I could think of was how to get out of there. How do I get out of here? Okay, alert, alert. I've just committed the cardinal sin. Oh my gosh. The next morning I was out of that house, boom, fast. I was out of there. And I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell anyone, even Jesus. I was like, oof, we can't talk about this. From that moment on, my life was never the same. I carried around shame and ugliness and a darkness about me. Something happened to me at 9 years old.
But when I read this, I said, okay, and I didn't know anything about Kinsey's personal life at the time. But knowing what it is to make love, as an adult person, I had 4 children, I thought, okay, whoever wrote this, the children have definite pleasure from being tortured, from fainting and having convulsions, from screaming and writhing in pain, and those were his words. Whoever wrote that has to be a sadomasochist and has got to be a sadomasochistic pedophile, because nobody else could write a thing like that. Amongst the elite, it was immediately a hot seller. The average person didn't really believe it. They were a little bit too cynical about that. But at the same time, you have to remember, the push was on. So what we had was a mass media blitz. It went everywhere. Now, the average person who knows about the world, they want their kids to be college educated, right? So their kids are now going to college. Now in college, they're all being taught that what Kinsey said is gospel truth. That the man who revolutionized sex for this country, the man who put sex education into our schools that reflected his sexual belief system, the man who helped change our laws and gut the laws that protected women and children, the man who helped bring us to a point where little girls are sending naked pictures of themselves across the internet. So this is the man who started the sexual revolution, a sexual psychopath. This is the man who said that children were sexual from birth, who talked about an orgasm for a little 2-month-old and a 5-month-old. So there's nothing that's traditional about this man. Nothing. This is not your average American guy. Yet the public perception of him, created by Indiana University and Rockefeller Foundation, in terms of all of their publicity, the public perception is, and I've got that in Life magazine, Look magazine, Time magazine, every Collier's, every major magazine and every major newspaper, presents him to the public as just your average Republican, conservative kind of guy, goes to church and got the pictures of Clara Kinsey knitting and making persimmon pudding. You have to ask, why create this illusion? Why create this lie about this man and his wife and their family for the entire world? And that is because this man will become the single individual who will alter American sexual conduct up to the very present.
I remember the first time I saw pornography. I was 10 years old. I was down in Ocean City, New Jersey. I remember walking into a little convenience store and I saw a magazine on the rack. I turned it over and it was Playboy magazine. I was like, what is that, And I can picture, I know the images to this day, the ones that I saw. And they were just like the table of contents images, Sure enough, the next day I went back. And that was the beginning.
I was angry at my parents when I got abused because I felt like they didn't protect me. Why didn't my parents protect me from this happening? So anger did develop, sexually acting out really developed, and that attention. I didn't realize how hungry I was for attention, but I was pretty desperate, especially for the male attention. So I learned real quick that if I was sexual, that the boys would pay more attention to me. Thus, I began to act very sexually, and even with, I don't know, it was really a confusing time for me.
One of the other major contributing factors, one of the things that really, I think, gave me a grasp of this issue was that one day it turned out that my daughter, who was 10 years old at the time, had been raped by the boy upstairs.
The psychopathology in young children in this country is exploding. The psychopathology, the amount of antipsychotic drugs written for young children has escalated like fourfold in the past decade. So we see this extraordinary problems in the young. So when a culture collapses, when marriage collapses, those who suffer the most are the young. And that's what's happening today. And God's first words to Adam were, Adam, it's not good for man to be alone. Okay? I think he could have gone on for many more chapters in Genesis. It does this, it does this, it does this. But so you have this terrible wound in young people of loneliness, of narcissism. There isn't that sense of solidarity, the virtue of solidarity, where you come together with people and feel support and strengthened by people. You have this divisiveness.
Mom wasn't rooting through anything, I had two older brothers who were into alcohol and doing things that were more obvious, getting in trouble, getting into car accidents, drinking and driving, and things that, Mark was doing everything right.
By the time I was a teenager, I was very hardcore and black-hearted. They have ignored me enough. Nobody pays attention to me. I started smoking and drinking. We're smoking cloves. Cloves was really in back then. I was like, and then, marijuana, wow, this is good stuff. I was, introduced to drugs in high school.
I didn't even recognize pornography when it first came into my life as a problem. It was so compartmentalized. I just thought it was normal. I thought it was a normal part of growing up.
When she said something to the boy, he commented to her, no, no, no. He said, I know that this is really okay. I've seen this in my father's magazines.
So the kids out there floating, how can I feel good about myself as a man? Play sports, work out, get a lot of muscles, and use women. Pornography, get into porn, they get fantasy world, and to try to strengthen their weak sense of their masculinity in that way.
So by the time I was a teenager, nobody told me what to do, especially not my parents. So right after I barely graduated high school, and I stress barely because like I told you, I cheated my way through high school, my dad said, get out. Get out where? You're out of the house. I just remember him opening the door going, out. And I just remember just this hot stream of like anger, just, he's serious. After all the times you ignored me, and after all the lack of attention, the lack of care, you have the audacity to tell me to get out? Ooh, I was so mad.
It lifted my spirits. I was feeling, pornography is the temptation of the lonely. It really is. And when I was in high school, I was feeling very lonely on some level, a great deal. So the pornography was this temporary lift of my spirits in that area.
And you're so full of pride and you're so angry, you're like, I'll never go back there. I will never talk to people. I'd rather sell my soul to the devil than ever, go back to those people. I mean, that's how angry you become. I didn't know what that meant, though.
And I said, what am I going to do? So I call my aunt, who I love dearly, in Maryland, upper middle class lady living in a lovely middle class environment, nothing radical about her. And because my parents were all radicals, when they were young. And I've been raised that way. So I'm calling my aunt. I want somebody sturdy, yeah? And I tell her what's happened to Jenny, my daughter. And my aunt said to me on the telephone, well, Judy, she said, you have to understand, children really are sexual from birth. She said, it isn't that she necessarily wanted, but then again, they do want these things, and so she would have projected it, and he would have picked up on that, and that would have encouraged, what took place. But don't worry about it. There's no problem. She'll be over it in no time. So long as you don't get excited, she said. Okay? I said, no, that's not right. I knew that, She did not want this. And no, they're not sexual from birth. And thank you very much. And I hung up the phone, right? And now I'm more traumatized. So now I pick up the phone. I'm going to call Carol. So I call my friend in Berkeley, California, Carol, who's had a couple of marriages, and she's had a wilder life than I ever had as a kid. I mean, I'm going to call Carol now. I didn't like the response I got for here. I'm going to go to this one. So I call Carol. I tell Carol what happened. And Carol says, well, she says, you have to know, Judy, children are sexual from birth. And she was probably putting out little, vibes or something that he kind of picked up on. And she says, and just so long as you don't get hysterical and so long as you don't get all bent out of shape, there'll be no problem. She'll get over it in no time, right? Well, this kid had been suffering for a whole year. But anyway, all right. And I say, Carol, what did you say? And she repeats it. And I said, thank you, dear. But that's not what she went through. That's not her. They aren't sexual from birth. And I love you. Goodbye. And I hang up the phone, and I think to myself, this is a party line. I mean, I've been a political kid all my life. I know a party line when I hear one. I know a party. That is a party line. There is Maryland traditional over here, Berkeley weird over there, and they're all talking the same talk, walking the same walk, as though they are reading from an existing script.
Mary, wait, please. Sorry, Mary.
Rage fuels you and you become very, so angry. It's like what I always did as a child. I just used all the pain and everything to hide how much I was hurting. Obviously, I was very upset. That's all I can explain. Something in me died. When my dad kicked me out, the full death happened at that moment. I thought to myself, I can't believe my own parent has done this to me, and it took me years to recover from that. So I was sitting on the curb, and the realization hit me, no matter how tough Shelly is, or, I realized, oh crap, I don't have enough food. And I just, remember I spent a couple days just on that curb outside, hungry. And this nice man just came up to me and he goes, "What's wrong, sweetie?" Took my hand, so sweet. And I'm like, "Oh, my parents kicked me out." I mean, I must have sounded like an idiot, but I was, I don't have any food, I don't have any money. And I was actually very innocent and naive. I didn't know. I had no idea. The great Shelley did not know what she was about to embark upon. And he just let me cry, and he said, "I can help you." And I went, "Oh my gosh, somebody can help me. This big, strong man can help me." And he says, "Yes, I can help you. There's a nice man in the apartment complex that wants to make love to you." And I'm like, "Huh?" Thinking, what happened to my big, comforting guy. And he said, "Yeah, he wants to make love to you and you'll make $35. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So right away, my first response was, then all of a sudden, I just felt like the devil came inside of me and says, "Well, your parents don't care. God doesn't care." I said, "Yeah, why should I care?" And I just became so hard, and I said, yeah, I'll do that. And what happened was the prostitution act, the man was very nice. So I thought, wow, this isn't such a bad deal after all. Of course, I felt the same feeling I felt when I was sexually abused, I felt again. The guilt, the like, "Oh, you're a prostitute. Oh, this is terrible." And you just kind of go, "Oh," just push it away, just like you did when you were 9. Just push it away. Just push it away. Just be that good actress, push it away.
So many factors have played a major role in this, what many refer to today as the epidemic of narcissism, living in an age of entitlement. And this has created enormous conflicts in schools, in communities, in marriages, in the entire culture.
So the progression stayed Playboy for probably throughout high school. In college, that's when it became, that's when the videos were introduced to me. And so that was where it really took a turn for me. You're seeing all this simulated stuff, and you're further blown away. It's like the same reaction you had when you were 10 and you were like, whoa, what is this mystery? Still being revealed at 20 years of age, through the eyes of Larry Flynt or some pervert. It made the woman only interested in sex. What it made the woman become for me was someone who was just as much interested in sex as I was, and that's all she was interested in. I couldn't process them in any other way than how I was using them. And I guess I'm doing all these things because I want to feel good, because part of me knows something's not right about it. Locking yourself in a room or whatever, you do it to hide. So you know intuitively that something's not right.
Every single day was traumatic. Every single day was boom, boom, boom. I mean, I was like, whoa. A sex worker has a crazy life. She lives here, she does this, she moves here. I mean, this is the nature of the sex industry. We move around a lot, we're constantly moving because it's survival. I really struggled with being a prostitute. I didn't want to do that. I really felt bad. No woman wants to be a prostitute. Dirty old men touching you. I mean, do you know how many different men's clones I have memorized?
It's a common thing I corrected my children. So I tell my children was selfishness, and I tell them it's the most common weakness I have too. So we're all in this together. That's what goes on in the side of heaven. It's not easy. And this pull of this culture, the comfort seeking, take it easy, relax, don't really give yourself. Have people give to you is very powerful. And to me, it's almost like the power of the movie Star Wars, the Death Star, just this gravitational pull on all of us to selfishness.
Hugh Hefner, like most guys, was a virgin when he was in college. He had been saving himself for his fiancée. Yeah? He read Kinsey and believed what he read, that everybody was really shacking up with everybody else, that we were a bunch of sexual adventurers, our parents and our grandparents. But they were hypocrites. That was the big word, the big H, hypocrites. the point for Hefner was, and for everybody really, but for Hefner in particular, I think in a way, was that Kinsey claimed that he proved scientifically, of course. And remember, we dropped the H-bomb, so we were in love with science. The bomb saved the world, right? So Kinsey claimed that our parents, our grandparents were doing all these salacious things, but there was no downside to it. In other words, we didn't have any venereal disease, really. We didn't have any rape. He said there was no rape. He said there was no child sexual abuse. He said there was no sex crime, really. There was no abortion. We were fine. So it was paradise here. We were carrying on sexually doing all these things, but there was never any real consequence to it. And he believed that if he did this magazine as Kinsey's pamphleteer and helped people not to be hypocrites, but to admit openly that they were engaged in adultery and they were engaged in premarital sex and they were engaged in all this activity, that we would have paradise. You know, this country would just be paradise.
Well, after doing about 8 years between stripping and prostitution and just all this trauma, and now I'm hardened, I'm jaded. So someone came up to me and says, why don't you try porn? I went, porn? They're like, it's legal. I go, legal? That was my most attractive quality about doing porn, was that it was legal. And I went, really? And the second most attractive quality was, she said, you can make like $2,500 a movie? And I went, what? Back then, you could actually make more than you do now. So I did my first movie, and I remember walking up thinking, okay, you know, I was scared. Of course, I didn't want to show it. And so I just remember opening these really creepy doors, and it was totally dark inside. And a fluffy pillows and purple and this sexy. I'm like, it's just different. I can't explain it. It's totally different than prostitution. Worse. And I remember that pornographer just going, looking me up. Yeah, he'll do good. He'll do fine, you know. And then I remember going in the back thinking, this is totally weird. This is bad. And just, you know, doing some drugs. By then I was a drug user and down in Jack Daniels. And, you know, getting ready, putting on my outfit, thinking, I remember I kept thinking, how am I going to meet people I'm about to have sex with? How does one do that? Hi. I mean, it was really weird, different than prostitution. In prostitution, you had like a madam introduce you, or you knew your clients, or there was dinner involved, or we all kind of, it was just different. I can't explain it. Just, it was worse in front of the camera. At least with prostitution, I could kind of call the shots, whereas in porn, I'm not calling the shots. The producer is, or the director. And the director just basically, we're all sitting there, and the director's like, okay, I want this, this, and this from the scene. My first scene was college girls with like a professor. I'm thinking, and then now me being the perfectionist and the playwright was like, how stupid is this plot? They need, so I kept trying to direct and like produce, and they're like, no, we just want you to. So I remember thinking, I'm gonna prove myself. I will prove myself to be the best. Remember, I had rage. Nobody told me what to do. By then, I'm black-hearted and jaded. I've been through a lot of trauma, survival. I'm a little bit older than some of the other girls. And I wanted to prove I was the best. That's just my personality and from what I've been through. So he told us how to do the scene. And as soon as it started rolling, I don't know what came over me, but I swear the devil came to me and says, everyone will love you. Everyone will love you. I'll make you famous. And I remember that really appealed to me, fame. I wanted to be known. I wanted notoriety. I want a recognition, someone to recognize who I was. That's what all the girls want. Someone to recognize our worth, our quality, our value. So I remember thinking, oh, everyone's gonna love me. and then I'll hurt my parents. The devil just had a nice, perfect place for me to be. So the camera started rolling, and I took over the scene. Yeah. So the people were kind of like, whoa, who's this wild animal? I'd had years, of experience of stripping, showmanship, showing off, being a prostitute, being a whore. So I was about to, I proved myself to them, and I just gave my all, let's put it that way, and was intoxicated, of course. So by the time when it ended and the director went, oh my gosh, you're gonna be the next biggest porn star. I've never seen a girl do that. Girl, we ought to hook her up with so-and-so. So I thought, I'm special. He noticed me. Oh my gosh. At the same time, as soon as I had that moment of notoriety, no sooner had they thrown the rags at me, clean up. Do you know how degrading that is? I remember going, I looked in the mirror, they had like this mirror there, and I just went, oh my God, look at you, you look like a monster. You're just, like I realized what had happened to me. And at that moment, I was like, I wanted to cry. But then this other tough Shelly, like, I was split. I know I was split. I had like little Shelly, and then I had like big Shelly. And little Shelly's like, and big Shelly's like, stop it. Stop crying. You're not going to cry here. You're going to tough it out. You're going to be the next hottest porn star, like he said. He's giving you more attention than your own father. So I just took the rag and wiped myself and tried to act like real cool, like it didn't bother me at all. But I remember getting really drunk and high that night.
Yeah, his intentions were absolutely to change the morality of the consumer. There was no question about that. But let me rephrase that and say, he didn't necessarily know he was changing their morality because he believed Kinsey.
I could have an encounter with pornography at least 4 times a day. It could monopolize up to 4 hours of my day, on the worst of days,
Hafner realized he had worked for Esquire before. And Hafner said, I'm going to step into this. I am going to produce a magazine that is going to sell a new lifestyle. It's going to be the male inside the house. It's going to show penthouse stuff. He would be selling a lifestyle. It's what kind of man reads Playboy was the big advertisement.
So I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time at home. And that in and of itself will feed the addiction. What are you going to do? I found myself refusing opportunities. It happened a couple of times where I'd rather be at home with the porn than actually go out and risk something. Risk my heart being broken or something.
So Hafner created a magazine in which the girl seductively posed, talked about how she loves to be nude. Oh my goodness, it's just her dream to be nude here, to give herself to you. I'm your paper doll, You can have all the sex that you want, and don't worry about it, because it never has a bad result. And that's how he structured that magazine. And so every aspect of that magazine reflects that theme.
Dr. Marianne Layden, who's a counselor here in the Philadelphia area, University of Pennsylvania, she says that for the sex addict, that women become sexual meat to be consumed for their pleasure. That's what women are. They become sexual meat to be consumed only for my pleasure. And on some level, I got that.
Most of the porn workers, if not all of them, believe these lies that this is my family. One thing I felt was, man, they all love me. Like, the pornographers love to have me sit on their lap. Girl, your hips are so nice, or you're so pretty, or, for a love-starved little girl, that sure felt good. And all the girls I've helped so far, except one, has told me they do not have a close relationship with their father. So don't tell me that doesn't feel good when an older man comes by and has you sit on my lap. It's very affectionate, like a false sense of affection in the industry. Whenever we go down and reach out to them, they're always grabbing and holding me. I mean, this is their language. And so they didn't receive that growing up. But this is what they do for each other now. So it's almost like they're all, it's like they're damaged people, and the porn industry lures in those specific kind of people to damage them more because they can exploit them.
That's the other big piece of pornography. Pornography is always really intimate, private space conduct in a public forum. And that is what all pornography always is. It's always putting the performer, the exhibitor, this is voyeurism and exhibitionism, which used to be understood as dysfunctional. You're putting that performer in a tremendously risky place. Those young women, when they leave Playboy magazine, Marilyn Monroe talked about it. She says people feel that they can say anything to you of any nature that they want, as though you're their property.
The girls are abused in pornography because we're told to do one thing, and then as the movie progresses, we're told do this, do that, and we're like, well, we don't do that. And they're like, yes, you do, or you'll be sued. And then when you're in the middle of an act with 5 or 6 people, it's not like you can say stop. They don't stop. They just keep going until they finish the scene so they can get paid. Nobody cares about a girl who goes, please stop. And are they going to say anything? Of course not. They won't ever work again. Now that I've heard all the girls' story, I think, that's exactly what happened to me. The very girls that we're helping, they're just a bunch of Shelleys. I thought I was special this whole time. No. It happened to them too. It is a cult. The porn industry is a cult. Of course, they tell you you're going to be this big star. They promise you all kinds of fame and fortune. Nowadays, you're going to get your own website, and you're protected too. We offer, testing facilities. You'll stay safe in the adult industry. They have this clinic called Adult Industry Medical Clinic, where the founder of the clinic is a doctor of sexology. Of course, the girls who are new to porn don't realize she's not a medical doctor. She has a sexology degree. A little bit different. When people view pornography, they are really watching mentally ill and physically diseased people have sex.
An erototoxin is essentially the toxic form of eros. Eros is a strong, passionate experience that one would have that hopefully leads to good things, that hopefully leads to a man and a woman mating and marrying and bearing children and trusting each other for lifelong and nobody getting a sexual disease from anybody else. And an erototoxin is the alternative to that. And what it does is it abuses the body in a toxic manner, using eros to cause that. We become toxic to ourselves.
Narcissism, to me, is at the root of the plague of pornography. There are other factors, but that's the root factor, which is just, you have the right, and it ties into Kinsey, it ties into the whole rebellion against sexual morality, that you have the right to use another human being as a sexual object, that the goal in life is your pleasure, any kind of pleasure.
You almost feel suicidal on some level. I can't say I actually, but on some level you're like, I hate my life. I don't like my life. I don't like who I am. I don't like that I'm reduced to this. There's suicidal ideations there that are at work, where you actually think like, this is what my life has become, then I don't want this life,
So, pornography is an erototoxin. It is toxic to the individual, and it's toxic to the body politic.
For 8 years, I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I always had sunglasses on. I was always full of shame. I'm the queen of shame. And also, I had caught herpes, a non-curable sexually transmitted disease, which totally devastated me. No one had told me that I was going to catch an STD in the porn industry. Of course not. They tell me it's safe.
Women have been told by the feminist movement that they're so strong, they can survive anything. Well, they can't. They can't. They're just human.
And the devil laughed at me. I can still hear him laughing at me in the mirror. When I looked in the mirror, I went, It's like a reality hit. And those, nobody's gonna want you now. Nobody's gonna want you now. You might as well end your life. And so I tried to commit suicide after I caught herpes because it was so devastating. So I overdosed on prescription pills. My mother's, I wanted her to hurt if I died. I made sure I got them from her. She was on a lot of hormone therapy, and I found some other pills too.
Mary, I'd just like to say I'm sorry about what happened last Saturday.
It does sometimes you feel like, oh my God, what is happening? What is happening to this culture? And there's this massive growth, extraordinary growth in anger in the culture, loneliness, sadness, insecurity, anxiety. We're reaping enormous psychiatric illness. We're reaping the devastation of marriages, reaping confusion about the human person. And one wonders what can turn this around. It can be discouraging. And I think people are going to realize that we are on a self-destructive course. We're an extremely self-destructive course through this whole sexual utilitarian philosophy. And my hope is that we're going to hit bottom and that we're going to turn a corner. I think it's Paul who writes, where sin abounds, grace abounds the more. So we're in a dark time, but we have to believe that God is with us in a very strong way, and He's going to help us. But I think we need an enormous movement of grace and of the Holy Spirit for that to happen. But I'm hopeful it will happen.
This was not what our world was like. Americans didn't come from that kind of a mindset. We're running from boredom. We're running from. And it used to be that when I grew up, we were running to.
We're hardwired fundamentally to connect with human beings. We're all on a journey to find people we can really trust and give ourselves to. Man finds himself by giving himself. It is through giving ourselves that we find ourselves. Why would that be? Well, it's because man is made in the image of God.
Deep down, I felt like this is really this is serious now. I need to get this off my soul, and I was tired.
We're looking at buying into a lifestyle that is completely alien to true happiness, completely alien to true happiness being contentment. It's the focus on the narcissistic personality, which denies the larger personality. It denies what we're trying to become as human beings.
It's not clear that just going over people's past, talking about their childhood, talking about their adolescence, talking about their hurts, really accomplishes that much. It's not clear that it really does. And so he's saying, let's revisiting basically the classic Western civilization approach to emotional pain, long before the mental health field ever developed, which is, hey, how about these virtues? You know, how about looking at virtues? So instead of saying, oh, I'm a victim, poor me, I'm a victim of this, I'm a victim of that, well, we all get hurt this side of heaven, right? Everybody. So how about forming character?
That spiritual sensitivity that I was there as a boy was drawing me to make changes. Well, I was working at the Juvenile Detention Center, and I wanted to give those kids who were high-risk kids engaging in all sorts of behavior, I wanted to give them hope. And so I started bringing that message to them and speaking to them about it. And then I started plugging in with the youth ministry, and I thought, geez, I really need to start looking at my life if I'm going to be around the kids that are, trying to learn about the faith and have a personal relationship with Christ. I better be walking the walk, and I wasn't walking the walk. I have to eliminate all pornography in my life. I found myself with only a week, maybe sometimes 2 weeks of freedom, but that was it, and that was 7 years. And it was just very frustrating, a lot of patience, so much so that you just were like, forget it, what's the use? I'm not making any progress, but I just didn't see it. And so once I could eliminate those things, I could allow God's grace to work in my life. I made a commitment that I wanted to excel as a Christian. I found God was challenging me. And this whole excellence that I pursued in football, I started to find myself wanting to pursue excellence in the spiritual realm and the spiritual order, and it was exciting because I was growing.
But I did not die. Instead, God saved me and I suffered a terrible overdose. And it was terrible. From the moment I sold myself for $35, I cried out to God every single day, please help me. I didn't think he was listening, but I didn't understand about his perfect timing either. And so shortly after my future husband came along, who was a pastor's son. Pastor's son marries porn star, go figure. God's humorous. He was the first man to look at me in the eyes since I had been in the sex industry and want to be my friend. I was confused. To me, sex and abuse meant love, so I was extremely confused why this person didn't want me sexually. But he wanted to play checkers and cribbage and pool, and so we became best friends, and we started reading the Bible together, and I stopped working because I was addicted to his friendship. He was just full of hope and faith and love. It was very hard to say no. And he was the first man ever to show me what love meant. He was my friend.
There's enormous confusion about the nature of love. Many people think today that, well, love is based solely upon your emotions, solely upon your feeling. Yet that is not, our emotions fluctuate greatly and are influenced by many factors, many of which are unconscious. But what's happened in our culture is that love is associated with, the word love is associated with hooking up, using other human beings. Love is not about using another human being. There's almost a delusion here that you can have a happy relationship just by having a sexual relationship, by having intense romantic love, and not having a profoundly deep friendship. But romantic love is in some way fickle, because our emotions are fickle. It can be in some ways a selfish type of love, because you're so happy, you're elated, you just enjoy being with this person. You feel you can't live without this person. Romantic love must develop into true friendship. And what happens in true friendships that's different than romantic love? Well, in true friendship, you become more mature, and you see more deeply the goodness of that person. And then there, your will, it's not just your emotions, but your will locks in to that goodness. And you think, I love the goodness of that person. So you move just beyond your own feelings and sometimes selfish feelings of happiness you have, and you think, my happiness is going to come in major part from caring for this person, for willing the best for this person, for trying to protect this person, to help this person be all they can be. I mean, one wonderful, loving, intimate relationship with your spouse is very important, but there can be even more happiness in the friendship, the ongoing, we spend hours in the friendship, than in the intimacy. And they're both wonderful. These are the foundation, the romantic relationship and the friendship, and it's only out of those two that intimacy flows. And betrothed love moves beyond friendship, which is far deeper than friendship. Betrothed love moves from I to we, and to become one with the other, a complete surrendering of yourself, and to enter into a greater love that's even beyond yourself. So it truly is a great art of love here. The love, by its very nature, as Thomas Aquinas writes, is diffusive. It goes out, it's generous. The model for that is the Trinity. And this is unbelievable in a certain sense. Here's the purification of sexuality. That the model for sexuality is not Hugh Hefner, it's not Playboy, it's not Alfred Kinsey. The model is the Trinity. There's the total flow of love within the Trinity. The Father doesn't control the Son doesn't control the Father, the Spirit doesn't control, just total self-giving. That's the model for betrothed love. Those who understand this, when they are intimate, when they really understand the very nature of human sexuality, will relate that when they are intimate with their spouse, they have this experience, not just of the love of the spouse, but they have this experience almost of this other love far beyond, that the couple is entering in this other, they're being pulled into this other love. It's far beyond all human love, into Trinitarian love. Many of my patients have said to me, young women have said, all my life, sex has been in the gutter. I viewed sex as being in the gutter. This really makes human love, where it truly is very noble and sacred and holy.
We had talked about marriage, and I'm thinking to myself, no way am I marrying this guy. No way. Like, there's a can of worms. There's like a huge darkness inside of you. And you can tell it's going to burst. And any more ounce of love, and that is going to be all over the place. And I could tell, like, even the demons, I had demons. And they were in me going, no, this is the last thing you want to do. This is bad. You'd have to be real. You wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't be able to hide the pain anymore. Like when you're in a relationship with someone, whether it's porn addiction or being a porn star or a sex worker, when you start to get intimate, you have to release yourself to be real, and that's extremely painful, even physically painful. I even felt like I was having a heart attack because that's how close it was getting. I was like, no way can I do this. I had this demonic control over my life that kept trying to push the light away, going, no, I can't do this, I can't do this. But he kept saying, come on, Shelley, it's God's will, it's what He wants, and I want to rescue you. And I was like, but God says, marry him. I've sent him to you. I've heard your prayers. The way we think God is going to answer is not the way He answers. So I ended up marrying him, and I remember being in a bad mood and a bad attitude about it. And we're going up to the city of Norwalk, we went up to the city of Norwalk, and I remember going, how much? We hardly had any money. And they looked at me and said, that'll be $35. And God went, boom, $35 to get in and $35 to get out. And that was a major revelation for me. I went, holy cow. But it wasn't all a bed of roses. I realized I hated being married. I hated men, period. I hated him because he was so good. And I was so rotten. I started losing my mind. Couldn't sleep at night. Having flashbacks is very common in the sex industry. I was shaking. I couldn't function. I couldn't wake up. Now I'm in Washington State. The military had moved our family there. I'd only had Tiffany at the time. I'm in Washington State, which 300 days out of the year it rains. I'm not in a good mood because it's dark and dreary. It's the suicide capital of the world. I'm thinking, this is not the best place to send someone. And God says, yes, it is for a sunny party girl. You know, I'm used to California, the beach and partying. And God says, dungeon for you. Yes, there is a place that God takes you to heal that is dark. He stripped me of everything I knew so I could just be with him alone. He wanted me to all to himself. And I remember walking into church. Well, first I said, well, we're going to church. I was so desperate. So I went like this in the phone book and went here. It was, you know, Champions Church, and it was called a different name at the time. But so we walked into the church, and all these people were like, they're happy and praising God. And I'm like in a bad mood thinking, this place sucks. What's wrong with these people? I mean, I had just been in hell, and these people are celebrating, you know? And I remember sitting down in the church going, no one's going to tell me anything. And the pastor's preaching on the test to prove your personal potential. I'm like, what the potential what? And he just looked around all this, and there's thousands of people there. And he looked around, and he just looked right at me and pointed, do you realize there's a champion in you? And I just started bawling. Because the little girl in me goes, yes! We've been in here the whole time. Let me out. Let me out. Let me fulfill my destiny. Let me use my talents and giftings. I don't want to be a sex object anymore. I want to be what God made me to be. I want to be who I'm called to be. And I just realized my whole life I've been frustrated because I've been holding in this champion. We all have a champion inside of us. And we're just lessening ourselves. We're just, you know what sin is? Sin is missing the mark. I've just been missing the mark all these years. God's like, I've got something better for you. And so I was like, I'm listening to this guy. If it takes me like 10 years. And I was addicted to the pastor because all he did was teach me how to live. Life application. He didn't tell me I was bad. He didn't judge me. Instead, in fact, he said, forget the past. We're starting over. Here's how to live. Wow, what a revelation. No one ever taught me how to live my whole life. So I sat there going, on every bulletin, then I would grab someone else's bulletin and go, get oh my gosh, can you believe this? You know, I was just like, it was like so amazing. I was like a human sponge going. So I would go every Wednesday and Sunday, and I'd fight it too in recovery, be like, nah, you know, I would go through these different, like, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it, and I would go through kind of a struggle. My mindsets and my lies were so deep that I didn't know that most of my lies were lies. I had done a lot of bad things, and I really had a hard time forgiving myself. And then my parents were right under me. They had a close second. I know I was mad at my parents for kicking me out of the house at 18. And then I was mad at myself that I had, as a little girl, I had all these talents. I was very charismatic. I was very talented. I was writing at a young age, and I was putting on skits and plays, and I had all this potential and all this greatness. And I was mad at myself because I felt like it was my fault that I never really did something with all of my talents and greatness, that I felt like I screwed up all the time. I was told since I was a little girl, you're the black sheep, you're screwing up all the time, you're forgetful, you're lazy. You know, so you grow up with these mindsets, and you feel like it's your fault all the time, that I must be really stupid, I'm unlovable, nobody wants me, and all these lies were spit out at me as a child, and in the sex industry just, you know, amplified that even more. So by the time you go to church, and the light hits you, but that's exactly what happened. You just realize, wow, I have a lot of lies I believe about myself. This is going to be a lot of work, isn't it? And sure enough, it was a lot of work, but it was well worth it. Come to me, all you are weary and need rest. My burden is light. I can understand how taking off the sex industry burden and the porn burden and putting his on was a lot simpler.
As a married man entering my second year of marriage now, I have that fullness, I have that appreciation, and it's such a precious jewel. I didn't want, when I was with my wife, to be thinking of those 5, 10, whatever women that I may have dabbled in sexual things with, or all those thousands of women that I saw in the porn. I didn't want them, and I kept praying, Lord, help me to be a sincere gift to my wife. I want to be, that was my whole year of engagement. Lord, help me be a sincere gift to her. I became a daily communicant. I wanted to be a sincere gift. I fasted for her. Lord, help me to love her the way you want me to love her, the way I was intended to love her.
Love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy. Love bears all things. It endures all things. Love protects. It rejoices with the truth. Love never fails.
We're hardwired fundamentally to connect with human beings. We're all on a journey to find people we can really trust and give ourselves to.
But we've been told, around us, that we have to live this roller coaster life. Well, we don't have to. And we don't have to be entertained every minute of the day. And we can find joy.
There's a happiness one can have in one's spiritual life. There's a happiness one can experience in giving oneself to God, and receiving from God, and giving yourself to loved ones. There's much more happiness there.
Look at Mother Teresa. This was not a bored person. Oh, we can't all be Mother Teresa. But we seek to be a great person, exactly. And in seeking to be a great person, that is time. That is work, but it's joyful work.
You know what it's about? You know what I figured out that success to true happiness is? Serving others.
There is a higher purpose for why we're here. There is a deeper meaning to our life.
Like, wouldn't you rather do something amazing with your life for God? I mean, I want to go down kicking ass. I want to go down, I want to face Jesus and go, well done, faithful servant.
We need to restore a true understanding of the human person, and I think the only way we can do that is to recognize that the human person is made in the image of God, and therefore is worthy of great respect. These are beings who are deeply loved by God. If we can view other human beings in that way, then yeah, we do see their goodness and their grandeur.
Well, okay. So, this was a topical song. Wrote many, many years ago during actually 1978, I guess, or 79, something like that. goes like this, and my voice has dropped 20 octaves, but that's life, okay? Well, we're living high in America, the home of the beautiful and brave. We're living high in America, the price is all the children, and we paid. You think you see on the TV what a life we are living. Since we're still living, you think this is living. So you open up your homes and let the television enter. Soon Dallas is your center, where once the center was imperfect love. Well, I've seen the whole story pass before. Yes, I've seen the children putting down their violins and laughter, thinking they could do it after, and after came no more. Yeah, we're living high in America, the home of the beautiful and brave. We're living high in America, oh, the price was all the children, and we paid. Then there's the Playboy penthouse hustlers are underneath his covers, and he thinks just like they say, she should look and be that way. And she thinks just like they say, she should look and be that way. Well, bye-bye, little children, we sold you with indecision, lack of courage and conviction to the panderers of a fictionalized life. Consumerized, dehumorized, dehumanized, dehumorized, dehumanized, life. I forgot. Well, we're living high in America, the home of the beautiful and brave. We were living high in America, but the price is all the children. It's been all the children. The price is all the children, and we've paid. La 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 la. La 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 la
Great stuff.
Well, I cut it
sad.
off, and
No, terrific. Well, let's take a break there.
Yeah.
We'll take a break.
an old voice is
Yeah, that was beautiful, I thought.
That was awesome.